Beyond plasma. At last month's gathering, I shared about an important scientific discovery, namely that 99% of the observable universe is plasma. But what is plasma? I would love to say that we arrived at a consensus about it at our last community gathering, but that's not what happened. It merely spurred on more questions about life energy, chi, Reiki, quantum physics, and other topics that form the foundation of this follow-up presentation. But I think you'll agree that the deeper you dig, the less plasma seems to fit into any preconceived idea of what a state of matter is supposed to be. Point to any object one could hold in their hand in this room, and we would likely agree that it's a solid. Point to any body of water, such as the Bow River, and we would call that a liquid. Observe steam rising from a kettle, and we would refer to it as a gas. Gas is a state of matter that has no fixed shape and no fixed volume. In that sense, plasma is closest to gas. When gas is superheated, it becomes plasma, which qualifies as its own phase of matter. But will we point to lightning, a TV, neon and fluorescent light bulbs, fire, the sun, medicine, fusion energy, a shockwave shield, or an arc that vaporizes garbage and instantly refer to it as plasma? Before last month's presentation, you probably would have said no, but if your experience has been anything like mine following our last exploration, you've since started looking at the world in a new way, and maybe even pointed at your TV screen while excitedly shouting, "Aha! I know what they're talking about. They're talking about plasma." And of course, your friends or significant others looked over at you as if you were crazy, at which point you had to offer an explanation. "Well, I was at this community gathering in March, you see." But in case you weren't at our last gathering, here's a bit of a recap. I began by establishing what plasma is, and I think many of you went away thinking, okay, plasma is a superheated gas, so for it to qualify as plasma, it must be superheated. Yet, science confirms that even fire is a form of plasma, and most people wouldn't exactly refer to fire as being superheat. This is yet another reason I say plasma is hard to define. Another example is the Northern Lights. One question I had since my last presentation was, do the Northern Lights emit heat? That seems like a perfectly sensible question based on what we know about plasma. There's an article on Live Science called Northern Lights, 8 Dazzling Facts About Auroras. Their explanation is as follows. The Northern Lights look like fire, but they wouldn't feel like one. Even though the temperature of the upper atmosphere can reach thousands of degrees Fahrenheit, the heat is based on the average speed of the molecules. After all, that's what temperature is. But feeling heat is another matter. The density of the air is so low at 60 miles or 99 kilometers up that a thermometer would register temperatures far below zero where aurora displays occur. And although we know that plasma TVs produce some heat, again, we wouldn't exactly call them superheated. I don't know anyone that observes someone getting close to a plasma TV yelling, "Watch out, you're going to get burned if you go near that thing." The same could be said for neon and fluorescent lights. We know that they produce quite a bit of heat, and although the mercury content of fluorescent lights might leave us a little nervous, we still wouldn't call them superheated, especially to the tune of tens of thousands of degrees. We also learned about cold atmospheric plasma, or CAP, in medicine. Naturally, any medicine that could be utilized for therapeutic purposes couldn't possibly be tens of thousands of degrees. How would you even handle or apply a medicine like that? We have a Reiki practitioner or two among our regular attendees at the question, and there might be some of you who practice Qi or have studied other energy healing modalities and life energies. Some of you felt that plasma provided a possible scientific explanation to your practice or beliefs. This may not be beyond the realm of possibility, and that's part of what we'll be exploring today. I say all this to dispel some of the assumptions about plasma we might be carrying in from my last presentation, or any digging and research we may have done on our own since. To truly understand plasma, we almost need to suspend what we think we know about it. And in today's pursuit of truth, we'll go beyond plasma. There is so much to talk about as we begin to explore the fourth state of matter in greater depth. As I've already shared with you, when I started working on this presentation, I began forming many questions of my own, and even had a few of my own shouting at the screen moments. Here's one that I felt important to share. By a show of hands, have you watched Stan Lee's Superhumans? There's an episode featuring Electricity Man, a man who's capable of conducting over 500 watts of electricity through his body. As the story goes, at 7 years of age, Electricity Mohan lost his mother. Frustrated, he thought the best course of action would be to commit suicide by climbing a transformer and touching a wire. But much to his surprise, when he touched the wire, he remained unharmed and lived to tell the story. In Superhuman, current Mohan is shown wrapping himself in wire and powering a hot plate, which uses an excessive amount of current. The current is what would kill any ordinary human being, but not Mohan. As we begin to explore Qi, Reiki, energy healing, and life energy, this is a good image to hold in your mind, because what current Mohan does should be impossible. Not to suggest energy healing is impossible, but rather that the human body might be capable of more than we even realize. So is there a connection between plasma and various Eastern medicine modalities and traditions? One open loop I left in last month's presentation was the possible connection to Qi, which of course raised additional thoughts and questions about Reiki, energy healing, even acupuncture, and the meridian system. This is what we're going to dig deeper into now. Trust me, it gets interesting. You might think this is far-fetched and esoteric, but there's more out there on this topic than you might even realize. Take the example of an article on Waking Times titled, "Qi Master Generates Plasma Flashes Around His Body." This article discusses Javanese Mopai master John Chang. The BBC television documentary from 1987, Ring of Fire, east of Krakatoa, shows rapid HHO plasma flashes around the body of Chang. This has been linked with resonant atomic transmutation processes, which are perpetually induced in the bloodstream. In this documentary, Chang is shown performing a Qi electroacupuncture treatment for the filmmaker Lauren Blair. He points to his navel and perineum and explains, yin-yang, positive, negative. When I flex, they meet together. This can generate electricity. As Chang brings his hands together, a flash of electric discharge can be seen atop his head. These flashes also appear on his hair and arms during focused projection of Qi. Chang further explains, God has given us all the yin-yang polarity, but it takes discipline and meditation to awaken and control it. Mopai techniques apparently enable EM induction of atomic reaction cascades in the blood near 37.5 degrees Celsius. What about Reiki? The word itself is made up of two Japanese words, rei and ki. Rei literally translated means ghost, soul, spirit, or departed soul. But in context, the meaning of the word is closer to higher intelligence that guides the creation and functioning of the universe. Some would even say the word Rei refers to God. What about Qi? Well, if you drew a connection between Qi and Qi, then you're hitting close to the mark. The International Center for Reiki Training has an article online titled Reiki Energy, What is it? How does it heal? Their explanation of Qi is as follows. Qi is the non-physical energy that animates all living things. Qi is flowing in everything that is alive, including plants, animals, and humans. When a person's Qi is high, they will feel strong, confident, and ready to enjoy life and take on its challenges. When it is low, they will feel weak and are more likely to get sick. We receive Qi from the air we breathe, from food, sunshine, and from sleep. It is also possible to increase our Qi by using breathing exercises and meditation. When a person dies, their Qi leaves their physical body. Qi is also the Qi of China, the prana of India, the Ti or Qi of the Hawaiians, and has also been called odic force, orgone, bioplasma, and life force. Now, at this point, I could just dust my hands off and say this matter is settled. The connection between Qi and Reiki is obvious, and we don't even need to look any further than the characters used to represent both to know they are closely linked. If we know that plasma flashes can occur when Qi electroacupuncture treatments are performed, it only stands to reason plasma could be involved in Reiki healing as well. But this wouldn't be the question if we didn't probe at least a little beneath the surface. I found an article on Living Lessons Library called Plasma Healing Takes Many Forms that seems to confirm all our suspicions about the connection between plasma and energy healing. This article states, plasma energy healing uses the naturally organized forces to make changes in the basic structures of reality. Our DNA uses plasma energy to bend the light in our bodies. This light or electrical charge constantly moves in and out of the empty space between atoms into the moment-by-moment biological experiences we call life. In a plasma energy healing, recreation happens at the causal level. The writer of the article claims to be a plasma energy healer and goes on to recount an instance in which she called a woman named Donna Popo, an elder and an artist, out of a coma. After coming down with the flu, Donna was in a coma within 48 hours. She was diagnosed with meningitis and wasn't expected to recover. As the author explains, at a party, a friend of Donna's mentioned Donna's sudden and very distressing turn in health. I said I would call Donna back from the brink. That was Saturday night. By Monday, Donna had awakened, her facilities completely intact. The medical team couldn't explain what had happened. They called Donna's return to life a miracle. Many people care about Donna and her well-being, and were praying for her. All is well. I've never met Donna Popo. All I had was her name. Donna's friend became a carrier wave through which I could connect to Donna as a non-local interaction. I didn't do a laying on of hands healing with Donna Popo in my office. I didn't merge with her physical body auric field's chakras while Donna was lying in a hospital bed. In acupuncture, qi, and even Reiki energy healing, typically there is some contact with the patient. Is it possible that plasma healing doesn't necessitate specific tools, touch, or even one's physical presence to work? Is it merely a matter of making a nonverbal, energetic agreement to identify a reality where the afflicted is completely well, as the author of this article suggests? Here's another interesting find. There's a reference to plasma energy therapy online on a website called Hang Wang. They say the technology behind plasma energy therapy is based on the work of Raymond Royal Rife. He invented the universal microscope in the 1920s to study viruses and bacteria. He discovered that within cancer cells there is a pathogenic component in the form of a virus, bacteria, or fungus depending on the environment of the host. This is referred to as the pleomorphic theory of germs. He came up with the idea of using precise radio frequencies to eliminate different pathogens. He successfully cured cancer and other diseases in the late 1920s, which brought him recognition and fame for his work. The author of this article claims he also attracted the attention of the medical and pharmaceutical cartel, who felt threatened by his work, and his life was soon ruined. His work, however, lived on. Supposedly, plasma energy therapy can be used to kill pathogens, heal cells, detox the body, and shift emotional states. They claim this mode of therapy is still an underground movement and is being suppressed in North America and Europe. Concerning what I've just shared with you, some of this religious accounts we've become familiar with might not be so far-fetched after all. The Bible, for example, is full of references to healing, reanimation of dead people, laying on of hands to heal the sick, and other phenomena involving unexplained energy. The account of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead is not unlike the story I shared about Donna Popo, the elderly lady who went into a coma due to meningitis. As the story goes, Mary and her sister Martha went to inform Jesus that their brother Lazarus was sick. Jesus reassured them the sickness would not end in death. After 2 days, Jesus asked his disciples to go to Judea with him, where Lazarus lay asleep. The disciples protested because only a short time ago the Jews tried to stone Jesus in Judea. But then Jesus said Lazarus is dead, so the disciples agreed to journey to Judea. Thomas spoke up and said to them, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." Lazarus had been in a tomb for 4 days upon Jesus' arrival. Jesus comforted Mary and Martha, who were understandably upset that he hadn't come to heal Lazarus sooner. In due course, Jesus went to the tomb and asked the stone that laid across the entrance to be removed. When they finally complied with his request, Jesus said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." Then Jesus said in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." Sure enough, Lazarus came out of the tomb, his hands and feet still wrapped in linen, and a cloth around his face. Another interesting religious account that could potentially be linked to plasma-like occurrences is the story of Moses and the burning bush. As the story goes, Moses went to Mount Horeb, and an angel appeared before him in flames of fire from within a bush. The bush was clearly on fire, but Moses noticed that it wasn't burning up. When he went to check up on this unusual sight, he heard God call him from within the bush. God then delivered a life-changing message to Moses, telling him to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. There's an article on Everything is Electric, and the title made me laugh a little. It's called Moses, the Electromagnetic Engineer. This article poses an interesting question, which is, were Moses or other similar characters like him in the Bible and other religious and civilization mythology stories about electromagnetic or plasma engineers? If Moses was in fact a plasma engineer, and you're familiar with his duel with Elijah on Mount Carmel, holding a staff of gold aloft to win battles, or the deadly power of the Ark of Covenant, then you may be prompted to ask whether the mythology of Moses was mythology or reality. And as the article hints at, there are countless other examples of religious, mythological, and even historical examples that seem to allude to mysterious occurrences involving plasma. Okay, but the notion that God delivered a message to Moses through a burning bush is just plain ridiculous, right? The burning bush phenomenon could potentially be explained as plasma, but the voice of God is another matter. Don't be too quick to jump to any conclusions. There's an article on Outer Places called Pentagon Tries to Replicate Human Voices Using Lasers. Author Jonathan Kesh notes the U.S. military is close to creating a talking laser. This device will soon be capable of reproducing human speech to scare off trespassers or enemies, making announcements, or sending discreet messages to someone who dropped their phone or walkie-talkie. As of now, the laser still sounds like a garbled human talking, and it only speaks gibberish. But how is this accomplished? As Kesh says, the device relies on a technique called laser-induced plasma effect, which is generated by femtosecond laser firing for 1/4,000,000th of a second and creating plasma. From there, a second nanolaser hits this ball of plasma at a narrow enough range of wavelengths that the plasma can produce light and noise. So long as this process is very precise, the user can fine-tune exactly what noises get made. The Joint Non-Lethal Weapons Program, or JNLWP, is convinced they're very close to producing actual words now that they've got the voice figured out, and will soon be able to transmit sentences and even light to very specific locations, so nobody but the intended recipients gets the message. So it might not be long before lasers are barking commands at us, and you can bet someone could program them to sound like the voice of God. As we've already discovered from the example of lightning, we know that plasma can sometimes be seen with the naked eye, and that it can occur in nature when the conditions are right. But are these occurrences limited to fires, the northern lights, and lightning? There's an article in Forbes titled 8.1 Earthquake Strikes Mexico Produces Mysterious Bright Flashes of Light. Author Trevor Nace begins by explaining that when the magnitude 8.1 earthquake hit in 2017, there were mysterious strange flashes of bright light that spilled across Mexico. This isn't the first time strange earthquake flashes have been reported, though Nace says the exact source is hard to identify. Sometimes it has been linked with tectonic stress and seismic activity. In other instances, it has been explained away as power supplies being destroyed due to the impact of the earthquake. But Nace says the blue and green flashes emanating around Mexico appear similar to lightning and could result from massive releases of energy from the ground as a result of an earthquake. Are you ready to shout at the screen yet? Nace offers many explanations as to why these flashes occur, but the one that caught my attention was this. Studies have found the generation of lights as a result of earthquakes could be due to the ionization of oxygen to oxygen anions. Once this ionization occurs, the ions can travel through the rocks through small cracks and fissures until they reach the atmosphere, forming plasma light. To me, this is the most satisfactory answer as to why flashing light has been reported during earthquakes. His article points to another on the Smithsonian called Why Do Lights Sometimes Appear in the Sky During an Earthquake by Joseph Stromberg. He begins by sharing that for centuries eyewitnesses have reported seeing an inexplicable phenomenon minutes before, during, or after an earthquake, strange bright lights in the sky. In recent years, these lights have been captured with greater frequency and on video. Scientists have been seeking an explanation for some time, and there have been more than a handful of theories. They've found that earthquake lights mostly occur before or during earthquakes as opposed to afterward. They explain that the tectonic stress buildup involves rocks conducting energy up to the surface, but not up to the ionosphere. This process begins deep in the crust where rocks are subjected to high stress levels prior to the stress being released to produce an earthquake. This stress can break apart pairs of negatively charged oxygen atoms that are linked together in peroxy bonds. When this happens, each of the oxygen ions are released, and these can flow through cracks in the rock towards the surface. At that point, high-density groups of these charged atoms will ionize pockets of air, forming a charged gas, a plasma, that emits light. You may know that I grew up in Japan, and I'm a survivor of the Great Hanshin earthquake of 1995. People sometimes ask me what that was like. I can still recall being woken up early in the morning to find the ground shaking uncontrollably. I held on to my futon for dear life and waited until the shaking to stop. Though the curtains to my window were closed, I distinctly remember seeing flashes of light as the earth was shaking. I think my mom offered an explanation, but not one that I would entirely recall. I think she may have told me that the street lights were flickering. We can't conclusively state that earthquake lights are indeed plasma, but there is certainly evidence to suggest this is the case, and I don't know about you, but I'm about ready to shout at the screen because everything seems to point to plasma being responsible. If 99% of the universe is plasma, then perhaps the real mystery isn't plasma after all. What if the biggest mystery is the remaining 1%, namely us? This prompted me to ask a couple of questions, the first being, what state of matter is the human body? After all we've learned about plasma, the fourth state of matter, this seems like a perfectly reasonable and important question to ask. Is the human body a solid, liquid, gas, plasma, or combination thereof? What at first brush appears to be a common sense question is one few people have taken upon themselves to answer. Go ahead and Google it for yourself. For the most part, what you'll find is people discussing this subject in forums. Google will not point you to scholarly articles, and I could only find one article that even attempted to offer an answer. The answers you find in forum discussions are largely unsatisfactory too. You'll find people barking back at questions going, "What do you mean, what state of matter is the human body? Please qualify your question." Others offer philosophical answers and begin their thesis by asking their own questions, such as, "What is a human?" I felt like I had stumbled upon an important question, especially since I couldn't find any easy answers. So let's dig into that article I just mentioned. It's called "What is the Human Body Made Of?" published by The Independent. They begin by pointing out that the main branches of science would each define the human body differently. A biologist would say we're made of water. A chemist would say we're made of oxygen. A physicist would say we're made of nothing. None of these answers are in fact entirely incorrect. For this article, science correspondent Ian Johnston caught up with Professor Shirley Hodgson, expert in the genetics of cancer at St. George's University of London. She explains that the human body is made up of trillions of cells. She says, all these cells contain a lot of water, meaning that humans are in fact around 65% water. The water in cells helps with chemical reactions, transports oxygen and waste, and acts as a shock absorber. I love the statement that follows in the article, which is, humans are also not entirely, human. Sadly, this was not an allusion to the idea that we are in fact made of plasma, or that we're all partially alien. No, Professor Hodgson was referring to the fact that though we have cells that are our own, that form our organs, muscles, and bones, a surprising number of them are bacteria. Bacteria helps to improve our immunity and the digestion of food, so both humans and bacteria benefit from this coexistence. Elizabeth Ratcliffe of the Royal Society of Chemistry offered a slightly different take, mostly from a chemical point of view. She says the human body is made up of 65% oxygen, 18% carbon, 10% hydrogen, 3% nitrogen, 1.4% calcium, and 1.1% phosphorus. She says there are over 60 elements in our bodies in total, including mercury, arsenic, selenium, gold, silver, and ruthenium. This is all well and good, but does little to explain what phase of matter the human body is. Then I discovered something in the article that almost made me want to shout at the screen. It says, we also have a little starlight too, indicating that at least a small percentage of our body might be made of plasma. Dr. Jess Wade, physicist at Imperial College London, says, starlight is a form of electromagnetic radiation, packets of energy called photons traveling at the speed of light. Photons can be described as the movement of electric and magnetic fields moving through space. The force that stops us from collapsing is the same one that lets us see stars and galaxies. It's also the same force that helps us move. Electronic signals move through our bodies along a series of biological wires called neurons and make us scratch our nose, wink. They even give us our memories. Interestingly, I discovered that the human body could potentially be better understood through a phenomenon that came up in our discussion at last month's gathering: spontaneous human combustion. There are many theories surrounding how SHC works. Wikipedia states, current scientific consensus is that most and perhaps all cases of SHC involve overlooked external sources of ignition. This would suggest that SHC simply isn't possible. Sure, this is a simple explanation, but not one many would be easily satisfied with. I came across a fascinating article by J. Alfred titled Spontaneous Human Combustion and Electrical Discharges in the Subtle Body. If you have the opportunity, I would recommend reading it for yourself because it pertains heavily to this series of presentations on plasma. In the opening paragraph, Alfred defines what plasma is. Are you getting ready to shout at the screen? Having defined plasma, Alfred begins by talking about spontaneous combustion in space plasma. Here's basically how this works. An electrical discharge in space is a sudden release of stored electrical or magnetic energy when the electromagnetic stress exceeds some threshold. In space plasma, cells containing different types of plasma develop double layers that play the role of energy storing capacitors, which can discharge their stored energy suddenly. These discharges are localized and are usually accompanied by violent processes such as rapid heating, ionization, and the generation of prodigious amounts of electromagnetic radiation. Then, Alfred explains how capacitors work and points out that many natural systems on Earth form capacitors as well. The Earth's surface and its ionosphere are two conducting layers which are separated by air. A bolt of lightning is an electrical discharge within this system. Now, here's where things get interesting. According to plasma metaphysics, the same phenomenon that occurs in space and on Earth can occur within our subtle bodies. It holds the view that our subtle bodies are composed of magnetic plasma, or magma, which generates filamentary currents that are also found in space plasma. Alfred further explains that the energies of our subtle high-energy magma bodies far exceed anything the biomolecular body can withstand. In spontaneous human combustions, the rate of total body burning is much faster than in the hottest crematoriums. Almost no fire damage is done to other objects in the vicinity of the body. Often the victim's clothes are untouched by the fire. Hence, it is highly localized, just like in situations involving electrical discharges in space plasma or a bolt of lightning. The evidence also points to a situation where the fire starts from within. The lower physical etheric body is an extension of the physical biomolecular body and is capable of generating a highly energetic burst of energy at high frequencies, resulting in a highly localized subtle fire that appears to erupt from within the physical biomolecular body. Earlier, we learned about Chi Master John Chang. Alfred goes on to share about electrical discharges during meditation and prayer, confirming what Chang had said about meditation. Alfred says, in the meditative state of one-pointedness, also known as hot meditation or active meditation under the Newberg-Aquili model, or in Qigong exercises, a person opens himself or herself up to absorb energy from the environment. Ruptures in the membrane of the magma body of an undisciplined person reduce the resistance of the magma body to external currents. If unsupervised by a teacher, a prodigious amount of current may leak into the magma body of the undisciplined and unsuspecting mediator. This energy will accumulate in an uncontrolled manner in the torso. When the electromagnetic stress exceeds a certain threshold, the current is discharged in a brief moment, and a spontaneous human combustion occurs in extreme cases. Okay, so earlier I said I had two questions around the mystery that is the remaining 1% of the universe that isn't plasma. The second question I had was, what state of matter is the very planet we inhabit? If everything we can see out in space is plasma, wouldn't it be safe to assume that Earth is also made of plasma? Again, you can do your own research, but the answers you'll uncover will probably seem unsatisfactory, especially considering what we've been discussing here at the question in the last couple of gatherings. The simple answer, and the answer you'll find at the top of search engine results, is crust, mantle, outer core, and inner core. Here's a more detailed explanation of what the Earth is composed of via UCSB Science Line. Earth's inner core and outer core are both made of an iron-nickel alloy. The state of matter, solid, liquid, or gas, of a given material depends on its temperature and pressure. Most materials, including iron and nickel, change from liquid to solid at lower temperatures and/or higher pressures. It's easy to understand going from a solid to a liquid at higher temperatures because we are all familiar with ice melting on a warm day. Why do materials change from a solid to a liquid at higher pressure? For almost all materials except water, atoms are packed close together in the solid state than in the liquid state. So, when you squeeze the atoms together with high pressure, the material changes from liquid to solid. As you go deeper in the Earth, both temperature and pressure increases. Although the inner core is very hot, it is solid because it is experiencing very high pressure. The pressure in the outer core is not high enough to make it solid. Still not satisfied with this answer, I decided to dig a little deeper. At our last gathering, I shared that NASA's current definition of the sun does not include the word plasma. They say the sun is a star, a hot ball of glowing gases at the heart of our solar system. But there's an interesting article from 1999 called Plasma Everywhere, also on their website, that directly contradicts this definition and basically confirms everything I shared about plasma in my last presentation. It also offers a bit of an explanation as to what Earth is made of. They explain, plasma is not a gas, liquid, or solid. It is the fourth state of matter. Plasma often behaves like a gas, except that it conducts electricity and is affected by magnetic fields. On an astronomical scale, plasma is common. The sun is composed of plasma, fire is plasma, fluorescent and neon lights contain plasma. Plasma physicist at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, Dr. Dennis Gallagher says, 99.9% of the universe is made up of plasma. Very little material in space is made of rock like the Earth. Overall, this article felt a bit disjointed, as if it was missing some content that had been edited out. But they then go on to talk about the Earth's magnetosphere. This is what it says. The plasma of the magnetosphere has many different levels of temperature and concentration. The coldest magnetospheric plasma is most often found in the plasmasphere, a donut-shaped region surrounding the Earth's middle. But plasma from the plasmasphere can be detected throughout the magnetosphere because it gets blown around by electric and magnetic forces. There's an article on UCL called Plasma in the Magnetosphere that explains this in a little more detail. Despite what a lot of people think, space isn't actually empty, and the Earth's magnetosphere is no exception. The magnetosphere is full of plasma of many different temperatures and densities, though most of it is too tenuous to see with the naked eye or even with a telescope. Either way, NASA seems to contend that Earth is a rock. But there is something called the plasmasphere, located outside the upper ionosphere in Earth's atmosphere. They say there's a cold, dense plasma that surrounds the Earth. If we were to classify Earth as a state of matter, we might call it a solid, but this merely spurs on more questions about space. If the Earth is a solid, then why are all other stars and planets classified as plasma? Again, what makes us different? Why are we the 1% and everything else the remaining 99%? I couldn't possibly call this presentation Beyond Plasma without literally going beyond plasma, so here's something that might stimulate some additional thought. There's an article on Live Science called Matter, Definition, and the 5 States of Matter. Hold on a second, 5 states of matter? Some of us are just beginning to grapple with the idea of there being 4 states, even though plasma was first described by chemist Irving Langmuir in the 1920s. Now there's a 5th one? The 5th state of matter is apparently called Bose-Einstein condensates. Per Live Science, in 1995, technology enabled scientists to create a new state of matter, the Bose-Einstein condensate, or BEC. Using a combination of lasers and magnets, Eric Cornell and Carl Wyman cooled a sample of rubidium to within a few degrees of absolute zero. At this extremely low temperature, molecular motion comes very close to stopping altogether. Since there is almost no kinetic energy being transferred from one atom to another, the atoms begin to clump together. There are no longer thousands of separate atoms, just one superatom. A BEC is used to study quantum mechanics on a macroscopic level. Light appears to slow down as it passes through a BEC, allowing study of the particle wave paradox. A BEC also has many of the properties of a superfluid. flowing through friction. BECs are also used to simulate conditions that might apply in black holes. You might recall that at last month's gathering I asked whether there could be a fifth, sixth, or even seventh state of matter. What I discovered shocked me. After entering the search phrase fifth state of matter into Google, I kept increasing that number until I couldn't go any further. Wikipedia shows there are essentially two types of low energy states and one very high energy state. With low energy states, there are 4 classical states which we know as solids, liquids, gases, and plasma. I counted an additional 15 modern states and one very high energy state. What this all means is beyond the scope of this presentation, but could be an interesting subject to explore further. You may be familiar with Occams Razor, which states that when you're presented with competing hypothetical answers to a problem, you should choose the one that makes the fewest assumptions. When people say things like the simplest explanation is the best explanation, or the simplest explanation is usually the right one, they're typically referring to Occam's Razor. The reason I've been compelled to shut up my TV when I know what's being described as plasma, and perhaps the reason you posed so many interesting questions around energy healing and quantum physics at our last gathering, is because of this very thing. Considering everything you learned about plasma, you realized it could be the simplest explanation to many phenomena you didn't previously have an explanation for. And the deeper you dig, the more you'll likely experience those shouting at a screen moments. But there are still so many questions to be asked. Based on what we know about plasma, could it be that many of the events we now treat as mere mythology could be based in a reality we're only beginning to understand? Was there a time when humanity better understood how the world works? Side note, if you spent any time exploring Egyptians and the construction of pyramids, you're probably left with few options but to answer yes to that question. Is it possible we've negated simpler answers in favor of more complex answers merely because they sounded more sophisticated and smart? Have we confirmed those answers with our own senses, and if not, why do we believe what we believe? Until last gathering, many of you didn't even believe that 99% of the universe was made up of plasma. Why are you now convinced that it is? Furthermore, if we only made up 1% of the universe, did we win a galactic lottery? Is humanity and the Earth just a random occurrence? Why are we different from everything else we can see?